Days at the Morisaki Bookshop, Chapter 7. The call came on the 2nd of January. Instead of going home for the holidays, I spent the period around New Year's Day hanging around the bookshop. With the store closed until the 5th and my uncle off on a trip to the hot springs with his friends from the Booksellers Association, I was all by myself. Over the holiday, Jimbocho was a ghost town. Since there weren't any homes in the area and the restaurants and companies were closed for the holidays, there was really no one around. There weren't even many cars driving down Yasukuni Street. On New Year's Eve, Tomo and I went to visit the Yushima Tenjin Shrine, but besides that, my calendar was basically blank. So on New Year's Day and the day after, I got up early and strolled around the neighborhood. It felt great to walk around the deserted city. Even the air seemed much clearer. With my scarf fluttering in the wind, I made my way at random, stopping again and again to take another deep breath. When I came home in the evening on the 2nd, there was a blinking light on the cell phone that I'd left in the room. I'd already deleted the number from my phone, but I recognized it as soon as I saw it in my missed calls. At that moment, all of the good feelings of the day magically vanished. I felt my chest tighten. My finger trembled as I tapped the button and listened to the message. "Hey, Takako, it's been a while. You good? I've got 0 plans at the moment. You want to come out? If you call me, I can be right over." I pressed delete before I'd heard the whole message, but it was too late. That awful feeling was already spreading rapidly through my heart. It happened so quickly, and now I would never get rid of that feeling. When the shop reopened after the holidays, the pain in my heart only got worse. I can't put it into words exactly, but it was like there was this thing that was heavy and cold, and it was starting to close around my heart. It made me realize once again that none of those things had ever been resolved. I had just tossed it all aside, waiting for my memories to fade away over time. But even though 6 months had gone by, just hearing his voice for a moment had left me all churned up inside. I understood at last that none of my problems had been solved. The trouble was still there. "Takako, is there something you need to get off your chest? If something's going on, talk to me." Around the end of January, as we were closing up the shop, my uncle suddenly said this to me. I was flustered. "How did you know? What do you mean? It's obvious just looking at you. Your uncle's not blind," he said, almost sulking. It was just childish. I'd been acting like everything was normal, but my uncle saw through the whole thing. "You seemed like you were doing really well, so I wasn't worried about you before. But lately, you just seem really off. When I try to talk to you, it's like you're not there. That's true, I guess." "Yes, it's true. Well, I might not be up to the challenge, but if you talk to me, you might feel a little better." I hadn't planned on telling anyone about it, but hearing what my uncle said, I realized I was wrong. I'd wanted someone to ask me about it. I'd wanted someone to console me. I'd wanted someone to take care of me. It amazed me how utterly pathetic I was, but my uncle's words had wiped out my defenses. As we sat together in my room drinking, I told him the whole story. Outside, a cold winter rain started to fall. We could hear the patter of raindrops hitting the window. "It's not a big deal," I said to preface the story. And as I told him what happened, I realized that it actually wasn't a big deal after all. I'd lost my boyfriend and I'd lost my job. That's it. Midway through the story, it all seemed so insignificant that I couldn't help but laugh. I fought through it and finished the story, and once I did, I felt a little bit better. The whole time my uncle just listened without uttering a word, as he drank his whiskey with unusual speed, even when I finally finished my story. After an hour of halting and stuttering, he didn't say anything for a long time. He stared at the glass in his hand like he was thinking of something. Then, at last, he drained the remaining alcohol from his glass and said decisively, "All right, let's go make him apologize. We're going to make him say, 'I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm a terrible person.'" I was dumbfounded. This was a totally unexpected development. What? Now? It's already 11. Doesn't matter. As he said this, my uncle got up and started to go outside. I grabbed hold of his arm in a panic. It's okay. I was being stupid. I just wanted to tell someone what happened. You're drunk, aren't you? Nah, I'm not drunk. Well, maybe a little. But that's beside the point. Aren't you mad, Takako? He took advantage of you. Yeah, I'm mad. I've been getting madder and madder, and I'm still mad. That's why we're going. You need to get this off your chest. If not, the ghost of this thing will haunt you forever. Yes, but I'll be even more embarrassed if it turns into me acting like a little kid trying to bring in my parents when I get in a fight, I said on the verge of tears. There's nothing to be embarrassed about, my uncle shouted in a voice that seemed shockingly loud coming from someone so small. The sound of his voice reverberated in the little room. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. You are my niece and you matter to me. I already told you, didn't I? I really love you, so I can't allow this guy to get away with that. It's my own ego. I can't let it go. You keep contradicting yourself, and in the end, it just comes down to your ego. That's why I'm going to get this off my chest. Even if you don't come with me, I'm still going. Tell me the address. I'm going to give him a beating. A beating? This conversation was suddenly heading in a dangerous direction. Well, wait a second, that's not going to end well. Someone will call the police. And he was on the rugby team in high school and college. If a string. Bean, like you, tries to beat him up, you'll end up getting beat up 10 times worse. That doesn't faze me, my uncle said, but he started to back away a little. Come on, let's not do anything foolish. Let's go back to drinking, I said, forcing a smile as I tried to smooth things over. Don't run away from it, Takako, my uncle said, turning back to me with a terrible seriousness. I'm with you. Don't run away. My uncle looked at me fiercely. I could see the intensity in his eyes. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. He was right. I couldn't run away. If I did, nothing would change. Wasn't that obvious? I bit down hard on my tongue. Okay, I get it. Let's go, Uncle. My uncle nodded firmly. By the time we arrived in front of his apartment, after 40 minutes in a taxi, the rain was growing more and more intense. We got drenched as we ran to the entrance without an umbrella. This is it. My uncle had stopped in front of the door with the number 204 on it. Definitely, I replied. Old memories were stirring inside me. Thinking back, I probably only came here 2 times while we were together. When we met at someone's place, it was always mine. The fact that I was only now realizing there was something weird about this arrangement proved how slow I was. My uncle let out a big sigh when he heard what Hideaki said. It's no use, Takako. This guy's rotten to the core. Hey, old man, watch what you say. Hideaki came forward into the hall, glaring at my uncle. My uncle was short, and Hideaki was so tall that there was an almost 20-centimeter difference in height between them. So even though my uncle was glaring back at Hideaki, the impact was, unfortunately, limited. Is something wrong? A woman in pajamas poked her head out from inside the apartment. It was his fiancée, Murano. Things had gone from bad to worse. Standing there might be embarrassing. It might be unbearable. But there was no way out now. Takako, Murano said. When she noticed me, she frowned and said, What on earth happened? You're all wet. She showed up out of nowhere. Isn't that right, Takako? Have you gone crazy? What were you thinking of showing up in the middle of the night with this old man in tow? Tell him, Takako. Frightened, I looked and saw everyone was staring at me. How had I ended up here? I felt pierced by their glances. I wanted to disappear in a puff of smoke. They were all waiting silently for me to say something. I ransacked my brain for something to say that might somehow bring the situation to a peaceful end. I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by. I was hoping he'd return a book I'd lent him. I wanted to congratulate you on your engagement. No, that was all wrong. What I wanted to say was something else entirely. Why was I here? to get something off my chest. If I just told them what they wanted to hear, that wouldn't fix anything. I told my heart to brace itself. Everyone's attention was focused on my mouth. I took a deep breath. My uncle was looking at me with encouragement. Tears formed in my eyes. And at that moment, I could feel all of the emotions that had been building. My uncle immediately grabbed the door and forced it open. Hideaki was standing stock still in the entrance, wearing a tracksuit, his mouth open in shock. He had probably just fallen asleep. His hair was messy, and you could see the imprint of his pillow on his cheek. But those solid, well-defined shoulders and almond-shaped eyes were just as I remembered them. It made sense, of course. It's not as if 10 years had passed. In that moment, I felt that stabbing pain in my chest return. Hideaki looked back and forth at the two of us, wide-eyed with surprise, then turned to my uncle and asked, "Who are you?" "I'm Takako's uncle." "Huh?" "I'm her uncle Satoru. Her mum is my older sister." "No, I get that part. I mean, what are you doing here?" "Oh, I wouldn't be here without a reason. Do we look like we're here to ask you to subscribe to a newspaper?" "No, I mean, tell me what business you have here," Hideaki said, sounding a little exasperated. I was watching the back and forth between them anxiously. My uncle was being extremely aggressive that night. "You want to know why we're here? We're here because you did something terrible to her. Don't act like you have no idea what I'm talking about." "Eh?" The volume of Hideaki's voice went up a level, but my uncle wasn't the least bit daunted. "You toyed with her emotions so mercilessly that you drove her to quit her job. Don't you feel anything? Don't you feel any remorse for hurting someone so badly?" Hey, I hurt her. Is that what she said?" "That's right." "Are you stupid? Maybe it's because you're her uncle, I don't know, but you think you can just swallow everything this woman says. It's obvious she's lying. She's the one who pushed herself on me." "How would she benefit from lying? Isn't it your fault that she quit her job and that she's still suffering?" "She probably quit because she felt like it." Raindrops dripping from his hair, my uncle rang the doorbell without a moment's hesitation. My whole body was trembling from the cold and the stress. I felt nauseous too. Whatever assertiveness I'd felt when I said, "I get it," faded away quickly once I was standing in front of Hideaki's place. As I stared at the metal door waiting for a response, deep down I thought about how much better I would feel if we just left and pretended nothing ever happened. But it was already too late. We heard someone rummaging around on the other side of the door, then the click of the door unlocking, after which the door opened about the width of a finger. A low, familiar voice said, "Who is it?" In the taxi on the way home, we barely said anything. My uncle, having exhausted all his energy, lay slumped in the back seat. I sat beside him, set free at last from my anxieties, lost in my own thoughts. It wasn't solely Hideaki's fault. I'd known that from the beginning. I was half to blame for the way things turned out. It was my carelessness and my lack of will that made the situation possible. But I just needed to say what I was feeling, no matter what. Even if someone told me I was being selfish, I had to share what I was thinking. I'd been suffering because I was too weak to do that. Maybe Hideaki never believed he had any reason to be blamed, and he felt caught off guard by my reaction, but I still needed to vent what I was feeling to him. If not, I couldn't move on. No matter how much time passed, I'd still be stuck. If my uncle hadn't given me the chance, I would have just been left holding on to these feelings forever. I turned the words around inside my mind, trying to express how grateful I was to my uncle. But nothing came out. In the end, the only thing I could come up with was just one word. So I said it to him sincerely. "Thanks." My uncle smiled and pulled me by the shoulder closer to him. Sensing the warmth of his body next to mine, I felt a wave of relief well up from deep within me. I was protected. There was someone who worried about me, who got angry because what happened to me mattered as much as if it had happened to him. For a long time, I'd let myself feel like I was totally alone in this big world, but all along there was someone close by, thinking about me, looking out for me. That made me immensely happy. The taxi we were riding in drove silently across the rainy, neon-streaked city. In my chest, welling up within me, there was no time to think. Suddenly, the words came pouring out of my mouth in a torrent. I came because I want you to apologize. You might have just been playing around, but it wasn't like that for me. I really loved you. I am a person. I have feelings. You might look at me and see just a woman you can take advantage of, but I think about things, I breathe, I cry. Do you know how much you hurt me? After that, I was at a loss for words. I was also sopping wet from head to toe from the rain and the tears and my runny nose. But after all this time, I had finally been able to say the words I'd wanted to say that night in the restaurant. "Well said, Takako," my uncle said, putting his arm around me and drawing me close to him. "What are you going to do? She just told you honestly how she feels. You have to respond." Hideaki hung his head for a long time, saying nothing. Finally, he muttered quietly, "This is ridiculous. I don't have time to hang around with people like you who have nothing to do. I'm going to bed. Unless you want me to call the police, you'd better go home." After he said this, he quietly closed the door. We could hear the lock click on the inside of the door. Then it was quiet in the hall. "Hey!" My uncle stared at the door with the intensity of a bullfighter, then he banged on it loudly with his fists. I held on to him desperately from behind. "That's enough, Uncle." "But Takako." It was enough. Really. I feel better. Maybe better than I've felt in my whole life up till now. It's amazing. This might be the first time I've ever raised my voice and told another person what I really felt, I said, and then burst out laughing at my uncle with my face covered in tears and snot. "If you say so, Takako," my uncle mumbled, seeming a little dissatisfied. "It's really okay now." "Let's go home then, shall we? At this rate, we'll both catch a cold." Facing the door, I murmured a final goodbye to the place, and then I left it all behind.